Hello, welcome to our Fake News Collaborative Project presentation. My name is Elise. I was placed in a group with Devin, Jennifer, and Kayla. We are all English teachers and we teach at varying grade levels. Fake news activities to inform and empower students. Before I get started, I want to apologize for this view. I recognize that we're not in present mode. However, I'm going to be kind of bouncing around from window to window, and I think that the smoothest way to do that is to keep it in this minimize sort of layout, so forgive me for that. Let's go ahead and get started. Our mission statement. So our goal is to empower students when it comes to engaging with digital information. Our students will learn to employ critical thinking skills in order to identify implicit bias and make individual informed judgments on the material presented to them. So how are we going to do this? Well, we have some activities planned. The first one, we think it's really important to start with informing students. What is propaganda? So students are going to be led through a brief lecture discussing the concepts of propaganda, maybe looking into the history and past uses or past examples of successful propaganda campaigns. Students are also, that's going to lead into a guided class discussion where students are going to be discussing the consequences of propaganda and maybe talking a little bit about propaganda that they've seen and the effect that it had on them personally. And from there, students are going to be encouraged to go online to thepropagandagame.org. And it's this website, it's essentially an online game. This is it here. It does provide some context, some background information on the concept of propaganda, but what I'm really interested in are these interactive games here. So you're going to choose a portal. I think the one that's most relevant is this one here, Take the Red Pill. So you click on that. You scroll down, again, there's some more information on propaganda, and then you're invited to kind of select from these topics here. Relations, politics, and media. Reflections is more of like its effect on people, but these three are really interesting, and once you click on one, you're sort of provided some examples of propaganda, and it sort of explains to you how each is an example of propaganda and how each are being used to sort of push a certain agenda and the ways that it's doing that successfully. So really fun and interactive, an awesome way to kind of familiarize students with the concept of propaganda. So going back to our presentation, our next activity is the media literacy activity. This I was kind of we were influenced for this activity by the TED Talk that we watched. It was listed under this assignment under the Explore, the Atkinson TED Talk. And at the end of her TED Talk, she talked about this concept of media literacy and how it's kind of ironic because it seems to be really pushing for neutrality and informed viewers and truth and honesty in media, but even this is potentially biased. So this activity is going to be guided by these three essential questions. What is media literacy in literal terms? What is the new concept of media literacy, and who determines your media literacy? So students are going to work in small teams or pairs to research information on the new catchphrase or the new concept of media literacy, and they're going to be directed to this website here. So this is a really cool website that I found. It's really got a lot of good stuff on it about this new concept of media literacy and what exactly it is and what they're pushing for. So this is a really good starting off point. And then students are going to be encouraged to further research media literacy, like the origins, the advocates, and look into what it is exactly that they're pushing for. And then finally, they're going to need to work together to determine, can we trust media literacy? Are advocates for media literacy truly neutral? So our third activity is the Follow the Money activity. This is also kind of inspired by something that Atkinson said in her TED Talk. She's an investigative journalist, and in her attempt at understanding fake news and where it came from and what it's all about, she followed the money. So just like Atkinson did in her quest for fake news, so too will our students for this activity. The students are going to work together and find maybe an article or a piece of like a campaign ad or some piece of propaganda, and they're going to research not just the subject being discussed in that article, but they're also going to research, they're going to follow the money. So who wrote this piece of information, this piece of media, and who is that person affiliated with? So they're going to be researching the author and then also the organization that that person writes for, be it CNN or Fox News or New York Times, Washington Post, or what have you. And then they're going to work together to decide, is this work truly neutral or is there bias present? Is there a potential for bias based on the research of the author and said organization? And lastly, our Real News, Fake News activity, and this is inspired by the YouTube video that we watched, Real News, Fake News, or Can You Spot Real News, Fake News? This man here was interviewing random people on the street, giving them examples of media and asking them to decide, is this real or fake? And in most cases, these people were duped. So we're going to talk a little bit about, okay, what is fake news? What about fake news stories make them believable? We're going to discuss necessary elements of successful, believable fake news stories. And then they're going to work in teams to take those elements, those necessary elements of successful, believable fake news stories in order to make their own fake news stories. And the idea behind that is if students are able to make their own fake news, then they are armed with the tools that they need in order to identify possible fake news in the material that they're viewing or reading or scrolling through online. So students are going to work together to make real news, fake news guessing games. They're going to fabricate stories, maybe around what's happening at school or maybe current events, and they're going to mix it in with true stories, and then the teams are going to challenge each other and try to stump their fellow classmates with their real news, fake news games. All right, our last slide is just some sources. All of the different pages that you have seen in this presentation are also linked on this page here. So are some of the sources that I used from the assignment under the Explorer. And thank you so much for listening to our presentation. I hope that you enjoyed it. And please feel free to borrow anything that you've found or seen in this presentation.